Depends on the time of life, if you ask me. Now I would say it's a stronghold. It is a bondage to sin. It's what feels like an insurmountable task or accomplishment. But previously, I guess I would just have maybe just blamed it more sciencey, genetic disposition. It's a task that seems unbeatable.
It kind of depends on the context, whether it was past or present. Past addiction meant to me absence of spirituality from my life. It meant that I was living in a hell made for myself. It meant that I was being incredibly selfish and incredibly destructive. But if I look at addiction now, it's something that I derive hope from. I've taken suffering and turned it to strength. I've taken my story and I've helped inspire.
Addiction to me is doing something without wanting to do it. Powerlessness, like being controlled by a substance that controls your every will, your every life, your every thought. Like crack was my drug of choice. When I didn't have it, I wanted it. When I had it, I wanted more. You know, same thing with meth and like heroin. All the drugs that I've used in my life, I was powerless over because like I was a fixation and an obsession on that one substance or all substance. It doesn't matter. Like I was a poly user, binge user, raging alcoholic, you know, and it started at an early age and it was just experimentation that led to a hardcore drug addiction. So it's powerless. You're controlled by a substance and a thought and a fixation, an obsession.
Addiction to me is like modern day. It's like slavery, literally. It was fun and games when it started, and then progressively took everything from me. My family, my wife, my mom, my brother, my father. Started when I was young, and then at the end it just took my heart. I wasn't myself anymore. I didn't know who I was. I couldn't look in the mirror, and it just destroyed me. Took everything I ever dreamed of. The person I used to be, like I used to love and care, and you know, I love the world and everybody around me. And then at the end, even getting clean at first, I wasn't able to bring myself to love anything or anyone, including myself. And it was scary. It was scary, but it was a monster.
Addiction is a demon that destroys families and relationships and lives.
I mean, for the most part, I think I probably had what I would call the typical American upbringing. I guess we were on the lower end of income because most of my life has been in a trailer park somewhere. My dad worked for GM, but when my dad and mom were together, he was the only one working. When they separated, the courts gave me to mom. She was a bus driver and had child support, so my growing up, where I was at any given time, was generally trailer park level income. And but I mean, I never did without anything you needed. Just didn't have everything you could possibly want. Well, I mentioned the divorce, and I think that to get to where I was at before I started drinking, you had to know it started years before when my parents got divorced. I was, the only word that comes to mind now is appalled that a judge could decide what my family situation would be. And I was immediately angry, hurt, rebellious to authority. And I don't know if I was angry at my mom, but I took it out on my mom because my 8-year-old thinking was that if I could get mom to be sick of me, she'll give me to dad. So I made mom's life hell. Well, mom wasn't giving up either me or the child support, so she just made my life hell back, and we had a very difficult, I think we finally became friends in the last 3 years.
More or less average childhood. My dad wasn't in the picture, but my stepdad, who came into the picture, was a great man. My mom was always very loving and kind. I never really felt like I fit in to the norms of other groups or anything like that. I was a little reclusive, kind of stuck to myself.
Were you into any activities when you were younger? Sports, teams?
I played baseball when I was younger. I was kind of a dork, always have been, always will be. I like my video games, I like my anime, and I just found where I fit in where I could.
I was sheltered. My parents were very close and loving, nurturing. My older brother and older sister were very kind to me. We all got along, but we were very poor, lived in a poor neighborhood. And, I was sheltered, being the youngest of three. I was, coddled, nurtured, all that, but I didn't know what the world was like until my mom told me that she had been an addict before she met my dad. And she had a religious experience when she was trying to kill herself when she was 19. And she claimed that she saw Jesus in Colorado and it saved her life. And then she got married and had kids. And I didn't understand what any of that meant. I was raised Baptist. I had a really good home, Christian family, a lot of love, but I just felt different from everybody. And I still do, but it's not a bad difference, more in tune with spirituality. You know what I mean? Because this recovery has brought me closer to God than anything in my life that has ever happened. So yeah, it was a good upbringing. I love my family. Without them, I'd be dead.
Were you in any activities, interests when you were a kid?
Oh, I liked art a lot of drawing. We didn't really go out too much, and I didn't hang around the neighborhood all that often. I was outside, but because there was a lot of drunks and alcoholics in the neighborhood that we grew up in, and people using drugs and police all over the place every now and then and stuff. But I used to draw a lot, and I remember sitting down with my brother making comic books when we were real little, making superheroes and stuff like that. Stuff I had fond memories of me and my brother. He's 5 years older than I am, so we were very close. And just a lot of creative things, and going to church, Sunday school, shit like that. And then later on, I was into sports with my dad, t-ball. I was getting bigger, and baseball. Going to the park, barbecuing, playing soccer. My brother played soccer in high school, so I wanted to play soccer. Everything my brother did, I wanted to do.
My father was a heroin addict. My mom was a meth addict. So I was kind of introduced young. I didn't necessarily do it, but it was in my life. And learning from them, they had the patterns of an addict, patterns of addiction. So those morals bled into my life. So without using, growing up, I had to steal to eat, and eventually, I started stealing stuff to feed me and my brother, pay the bills, just survive. I didn't get to go to high school because I had other things to worry about, and I always swore I'd never be like them, and it was a nightmare.
Well, she was born on St. Patrick's Day. I had a really weird labor with her. I had preeclampsia, so we were trying to induce the birth, but it wasn't working. And then all of a sudden I went into labor for 15 minutes and she was born on the way to the delivery room. Let's see. When she came home, I knew there was something wrong with her constant crying. She had an older sister that had juvenile migraines, and I had a feeling that that's what was going on with her, but I couldn't get the pediatrician to send a newborn to the neurologist. So the first few months was really, really hard. A lot of screaming and crying, and we really couldn't help her. I don't remember how old she was when we finally got her into the neurologist, and he confirmed what I thought. So she did a lot of self-soothing as a toddler. She would sit and bounce on the couch trying to help herself. They couldn't give her any medicine until she got a little bit older. So she suffered a lot through the migraines. And as a toddler, she started having nosebleeds, and I don't think that had anything to do with it. That was allergy-wise, but that made her very afraid to go out of the house. She carried a wash rag with her everywhere she went, and I had a really hard time getting her to go to preschool because she was afraid to leave the house. She was afraid she would have a migraine or a nosebleed. So she, at first, was very housebound. You know, she didn't want to go anywhere. Well, when she got a little bit older, she got into school, she became very popular very quickly. She hung around with a little clique of girls right from the very beginning, very popular. And it soon showed up that by the time she was in 2nd or 3rd grade, she was highly intelligent, and she was tested, I'm not sure how, they test them for the CHIP program, which is the Children for High Individual Potential, something like that. And she was placed in that program in 3rd grade. She hated it. It was busy work. It was a lot of busy work. It wasn't challenging for her. So as she went up through the grades, her grades themselves were the challenge. She was bound and determined to get the highest grades of every test. Even the standardized test, they announced it over the loudspeaker that she was the highest in her class, and this became an obsession for her. She had to have the highest grades and beat everyone. When she got around 5th grade, she started getting kind of an attitude towards the teacher, like she knew better than the teacher did. I really wanted to put her in Montessori, but I couldn't afford it. Montessori schools would have allowed her to progress. So she became very restless, and when she got into middle school, she started getting in with the wrong group of kids, started getting into some trouble. She still kept her grades up. She went to a computer competition and they won 1st place. But she started getting rebellious. She broke into the school's computer security program, meant to keep the kids offline when they were in school, and she broke into that. She was just highly intelligent, but highly bored. And then around, I don't know, 8th grade, something like that, she got in with a group of kids from another city, from the next city over, and she said she was very honest with me and started telling me things about that they were getting into his mom's medicine cabinet. And she swore that she wasn't taking these pills, just this boy was. And that was red flags for me, because I already had 2 older daughters and, you know, been through all these DARE programs and all this kind of thing. So I really didn't want her hanging around over there, and she swore to me that she was smart enough not to do that kind of thing. When she got into the beginning of 9th grade, everything was just going so good for her. She was, what do you call she was a flag twirler with the band and all that kind of stuff. Still popular. And she got a really bad headache, and she ended up in the ER first thing I thought was that she had taken some kind of drugs. And she tested clean completely. And they ended up doing a spinal tap, and she had meningitis.
I was an angry person, and all that was bottled up. So like when I started drinking, it was relief from that desire to have control over everything, from that anger at everyone, from that, you know, it was relieving, comforting, just a way to escape, because I was just always so tense and angry. Yeah, it was just an escape from me. Like I was so angry, I didn't like being around me, you know, I didn't like yelling and cussing all the time, I didn't like the tenseness, I didn't like the high blood pressure, whatever was going on, so I needed to forget, but I didn't know how to not be angry, but alcohol just made you happy, it made you relaxed, it made you, you know. Probably, well, the first big negative effect I can remember is I got a DUI, probably within a month after turning 21 years old. And so I was just legal to drink when I got my first DUI. And that was the first, like, big trouble, I guess, like consequences with the law. And then by the time I finished that probation, it was within a year I picked up a domestic violence with a girlfriend I was seeing at that age. And so I spent 3 out of 4 years in my, you know, early 20s on probation, in trouble with the law. I knew that I couldn't, because I don't think that alcohol caused the problem, but I knew that I couldn't get control of the problem or keep control of the problem if I was drinking. Like, the things that I did, I didn't think that I would do sober. So it was kind of like, well, but I knew that I didn't, like, I would have blamed the problem on the pain and anger and my parents or whatever, you know, whatever teenage calculations I had of why I was so angry all the time. I wouldn't have blamed the alcohol. I knew the problem was the anger, but I knew that I wouldn't have made the decisions that got me in trouble had I been sober, so the alcohol had to go because it was my anger combined with the alcohol was getting me in trouble. And I'm not really sure, like, I don't think it was like full-on chemical dependency at that time. It was still like maybe what most people would call substance abuse now. It's just heavy drinking. So at that time, I'm not sure that it was a problem. Like, to me, all teenagers drank as often as they could, you know, right? Like, I don't know. I didn't understand that not all teenagers did that.
So what was the motivator for the first time that you went into recovery?
The law, courts. The first time was the DUI, and then, but they refer you to AA, and I don't know, I don't think I had a clear perception of what AA was. It's just a slightly negative idea, but I actually kind of liked AA. Like, the people seemed like my normal kind of people that I would associate with, and I'm a pretty open person, so being able to talk to people like that wasn't difficult to me, and it was good to see other people. I don't know, I guess I liked AA, and it seemed like I met people that were sober for a while, so if I really wanted to get sober and stay out of trouble with the law, this looked like the route to go. There were people I kind of admired or I liked, but it probably took me about a year to decide to get a sponsor. I would say that trying to figure out the program on my own and thinking that I could do it on my own without having to go through stuff like, you're not supposed to have a girlfriend for a year. What 20-year-old guy is going to not have a girlfriend for a year? And you're not supposed to, you're supposed to call your sponsor like every day for 90 days. I didn't call anybody every day. I didn't call my mom every day, you know. So some of the stuff to me seemed ridiculous. I'm like, I'm a smart guy. I can read these 12 steps and figure out how to do it, and I don't need a sponsor. But after spending a year of doing what I was calling the 30, 60, 90 shuffle, where I'd get 30 days relapse, 60 days relapse, 90 days relapse, 30 days relapse, I did that for like a year, and was still on probation, so at any time I could have went back to jail and gotten more. I'm sure I did get a couple of consequences at the time. So it was like, I have to stop doing this somehow. Maybe the sponsor thing has something to it. Well, I don't know. I don't remember what fueled me to get a sponsor. I probably got a violation for one of my relapses, would be my best guess. And so I got the sponsor, and I was more motivated. Well, maybe it was the second charge, even the domestic violence, because I never thought that I would hit anyone, much less a woman. So because I really literally have ever swung on one person besides this woman in my life. So I didn't think that I could stoop that low. So it definitely needed to change. And so I did like everything the sponsor told me to do. So of course I was successful. Problem was I set myself up thinking, well, I'll give this a try for like, what do you think you need to to see if it is good or not? I figure if you don't give it your best for like a year, you can't even really judge it. So I set up myself. I said, I'll give it a year, and if it don't work, then I'll go back to living life the way I want to live it. And so like within a few days of my year anniversary at that time of doing everything the sponsor told me, I went back out there and stayed out for a long time.
I tried pot for the first time when I was about 11 or 12. I had older friends. I was doing it to fit in. Before it became a problem, it was something that helped me be a part of something. It helped me not feel the things I wanted to feel. It helped me be different. It was more about self-exploration and, I don't know, bits of rebellion that, you know, seemed to just, it's hard to describe. When things got bad, it was methamphetamine and crack cocaine. And that kind of evolved from grief and loss, a little bit of trauma, and you know, it became something so quick, and then after it became what it became, it was something I couldn't put down when I wanted to. But it helped me not feel. It helped me escape the things that I was feeling and escape what I was trying to get away from. It was in my mid-20s. My best friend actually killed himself, and I used Xanax to escape. And that's the first time it really got out of control, and I hurt myself and those around me.
Were you ever in any legal trouble or?
I am a felon. I have multiple drug arrests, multiple driving unsuspended due to drug arrests, and it's all centered and focused around addiction. I mean, all my legal problems I've ever had has been a direct result of my drug addiction.
How many times have you gone through a recovery program so far?
Right now, I think I'm on about my 4th or 5th. I've only ever really taken it seriously about twice. My first experience with recovery, I went to a rehab, and then it was mostly to appease others. It was very much influenced by people saying that I had a problem and I had to fix my problem. And although I was aware I had a problem, I either didn't really want to fix it or it wasn't my own choice of doing. And I guess I really wasn't ready yet. I hadn't had enough pain. I hadn't had enough loss.
First time I tried substance, I tried weed, you know, marijuana. I believe I was in the 7th grade, and I had just recently smoked a cigarette. You know, it was at lunch, And I remember this particularly, that I went to I was hanging around with a couple kids, and we went behind, where all the kids smoked or whatever. And this was middle school. I was pretty young. I was like 12. And I had hit a joint because someone had brought one, and that's pretty early to be smoking weed. But, like, that's what happens. Some parents, like, get down on that shit when they're, the kids are around. I don't know. But, like, you know what I mean? So, like, I remember coughing a lot and getting, like, a real bad headache and, like, feeling, like, just really silly, like, kind of liking it, But I didn't start getting big into substances till around, like, 14, 15, 16. Where I started trying a wide variety of habitual drugs, like on a daily basis, where I was actually like drinking. Like I would have my brother buy me vodka, or he'd bring something home and we'd sneak it around the house and take shots or whatever. Fun. I enjoyed it, it got me out of my shell, especially alcohol. I liked smoking pot when I was in school. Like I was part of like the burnout crowd. Like I had long hair, all hippie, listened to like old music and shit. I did a lot of artwork and like, trying different substances. Like I said, my brother, when I was 16, I tried ketamine. I didn't even know what it was. My brother brought it home and he gave it to me and he said, try this. And like, I was like, this is weird as fuck, this experience, because I didn't know what it was or what it was going to do to me. And that's the kind of like experimentation I had at that early age. Like I wanted to see what things would do to me because I didn't like the way I felt. Like I didn't know I was unhappy and like really reserved and like really shy and kind of like felt isolated. And the drugs and the alcohol really got me out of that fear that I was being judged by people, or fear of myself, or insecurity, because everyone goes through that stuff. We're kids, we're all insecure about everything. You're going through puberty, all that shit. You got people around. It's rough, and then you throw, desire and all that shit in there, like the use of, like anything. Like it's a hard time for kids, I was about I think 18, maybe 19. Well, no, it was still late high school. I dropped out. I began taking a lot of Adderall and different, Vicodin, painkillers and stuff. And because a couple friends would bring stuff in from their parents' cabinets or prescriptions they had, and we would dump it on a table, mix it around, and then just start taking stuff into class. And I started liking pills because like it was an easy high. You just pop something real quick and like whatever. You don't gotta smoke it, you gotta cook it, you just eat it. It became a problem probably around 18 or 19. Like after I dropped out, I went to an adult ed program and I ended up meeting with new people, other dropouts from high schools around like, different areas that I was in. And I started taking like over-the-counter cold medicine and like Robitussin and eating shrooms, taking acid, drinking really high alcohol content, liquor. And I remember the group of friends, we had like it was really, really weird. We had like this kind of like, I can't remember what I was thinking about it a couple days ago, where we had like I had a destructive personality. I wanted to see how far I could take something. Like I would take like a lot of like handfuls of pills, like over-the-counter cold medicine, and drink Robitussin and get like super high and then mix it with alcohol. And like, so I became like a binge user where like I pushed the limit and pushed my body, and like that resulted in a lot of overdoses and like sicknesses, from like alcohol abuse, like landing me in the hospital and like organs getting, disintegrated, like shutting down, You know, I developed pancreatitis when I was 27 from drinking too much.
12 years old, I started drinking. It was fun at first, you know, an escape, a place to, you know, get away from reality. And I didn't even notice it at the time. I was just partying with my friends. It was normal. It's what I saw my whole life. And it wasn't drugs, so it was okay. It took all the responsibility. Like, I didn't have to face reality. I could just escape. My brother passed away when I was 12 years old. He committed suicide, and at that point the world just, it was really dark, and it was a way for me to not have to deal with it. I just drank every night, hung out with my friends, and like I said, I thought it was normal. It was how you deal with your issues. I was about, I think 15. I had failed 52 consecutive drug tests for marijuana on probation. I was on a probation for a 93-day misdemeanor, and it turned into, I think, 5 years of probation. I did like a total of 2 years locked up, in and out, and it was for weed, failing drug tests for weed. So I'm like, I'm not an addict, like, forget you guys, like, and yeah, it was just weed, but it was I realize now that it was the pattern that I took on with the weed that made my probation officer. I actually did 90 days inpatient for marijuana, so it was like a joke to me. I didn't take it serious, and but it wasn't the weed that made them see that. It was the behavior pattern, the things I was doing, what I was using the weed for. And it was to escape my issues, to not deal with it. I think I was, you know, about 15, I quit stealing. I found out I could sell drugs. And I started doing that. I swore I'd never be like my parents, so I didn't do them. I sold them. And I thought that was fine because that's what they did. And it was like, just, you know, I justified it in my head because that's how I survived. And, you know, over time, you know, and even at that point I was wrecking everyone's life around me. But I think it was about 16 years old, I started doing cocaine, snorting it, and just thought it was, you know, it went right in with the party scene. And I think the first time actually though was at a party. Somebody handed me a bag and it was like, dip your finger in that, rub it on your gums, and I thought I was Superman. Like, it was the best thing I ever found. And that's when it was kind of blast off from there.
When was the first time you remember entering recovery?
I was 15. I went for marijuana, but I refused. Like, I'm not an addict, it's weed. I refused to even hear it. And my counselor, to try to get through to me, was like, okay, we're gonna work on life skills. We're not gonna work on addiction. And I took a lot out of it as far as living. I didn't have really moral principles from my parents. So I did learn a lot, but still that denial was there where, like, I'm not an addict. So I came home, and the first thing I did was, my first overdose was my first day out. Someone introduced me to spice, and that was, they're like, oh, it's weed, but it's legal. And I didn't know it was chemicals. I thought it was like a natural plant that wouldn't hurt you. And I hit it, and I fell on the ground, and my heart stopped. And it was just, you know, I just didn't take the whole denial made me, because it's just this, and then it just turned into, every time I escalated, it's just this. I'm not doing, there's always something worse that I could compare it to. I went to a 90-day inpatient when I was 15. When I was 20, I went to detox for 3 days. I didn't make it 3 days. I left after 2 days, and 7 days later I went to prison for a decision I made while intoxicated. That was kind of my first eye-opening that I have an issue. And then leaving prison, getting out of prison, I stayed clean 9 months. That was my longest stint in recovery. And then I went to rehab at 23, and then just recently again at 25.
She went into seizures. It was really terrible. I think the seizures were from all the medications that they were putting in her IV. It was really, really hard. She got a lot of neurological damage from that. And by the time she went back to school, it was close to the time of exams, and most of her teachers let her take them orally because she couldn't hold a pencil. She couldn't sit still. She was shaking really, really bad. At that point, she was, by the time she'd gotten to, let's see, 16, I think it was, she couldn't handle school. They were making fun of her. She was no longer popular. The kids would laugh at her because she would sit in the chair and her legs would shake and her hands would shake. And so I homeschooled her. Matter of fact, I think she was younger than 16 because I homeschooled her. And we tried doing that, and that was really, really hard because there was a lot of reading. It wasn't the kind of homeschool that you have now online. So there was a lot of reading, and she was just not doing well. And by this time, she had gotten to 16, and she quit school. And it was really just a matter of time. She came to me and said, "Mom, I feel like I'm going to kill myself." And so I took her to the ER, and they put her in a mental hospital. I'm sure that's not the politically correct name. They drugged her up really bad, and they put her in with a girl who tried to kill herself in front of Chelsea, took the staples out of a teen magazine and sliced her wrist because she said there was a demon in the room, and Chelsea freaked out and wanted to come home. So they released her, and they released her into the care of myself, but she was to go to an outpatient. It was a family practice, so to speak, and she went through what they call the milieu of different classes and things like that. They were really, really into drugs, and I call them drugs even though they're prescription drugs. Chelsea started realizing that these drugs, when they first gave them to her, would produce a high. So what she would do is look these things up on the internet, and she would see what the side effects were, and she would tell her counselor that she was having side effects. Can we switch to another medication? Because each time they switched to a new medication, it would give her a temporary high until her body got used to it. Yeah, she would convince the counselors to switch her to new drugs, and then she switched counselors when they started kind of catching on to what she was doing. And this went on and on and on, and she finally got a counselor who was older, and she was going for her master's degree, and she talked to me alone and said, "This has got to stop." And I said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "Could I drop Chelsea as my client and take you on as my client so we can figure out what's going on and how to help her?" And so she did, and she was fantastic. And she said that she had had a lot of experience dealing with this, that kids learn how to manipulate and do this kind of thing. And it really looked like Chelsea was heading in a bad direction. So eventually, when she was about 17, I took her out of this place, and I put her in a private counseling. The counselor there, the very first thing she did was said to Chelsea, "Okay, here's something you got to realize. You're a drug addict." And Chelsea just laughed and Said, right. And she, Chelsea's thing was, well, these drugs are prescription drugs, so they're fine. And the lady said, no, they're not fine. And you've been playing the system. You've been playing these counselors. And the very first thing that you're going to do if you're going to be my client is you are going to accept responsibility. You are not going to blame your siblings, your peers, the counselors, your parents. You're not going to blame anyone else. You're going to accept responsibility for getting better. And, I realize that you have this neurological damage, but there's ways to get around these things. And so she took her off everything, cold turkey, and started out with anti-anxiety medication. And then Chelsea turned 18, and then I couldn't get updates anymore because of the privacy issues. But Chelsea looked like she was doing so much better. And eventually she stopped seeing the counselor. And she had a dream that she was going to go to college. She got her GED and she scored really high on it, but the little scholarship she got was to a different college. She wanted to go to one where she could take a mechanics course. And her dream was to be a female mechanic and own her own shop, so that other females could bring their cars in and feel comfortable. So she did. She started going to college. She got a student loan, and she was doing great. She got a job as an apprentice in a body shop, and she was learning welding and body repair, and she was doing wonderful. All of a sudden, there was a class change, and they lost all of her paperwork having to do with the student loan. Chelsea went into a severe depression. I went with her. We tried to work this out. The college blamed it on this department, and she'd go around in circles, and it wiped out her student loan. She didn't owe anything, but she couldn't take any more classes. So at that point, she admitted to me, Mom, I have a problem. Okay, she said, I got to deal with this problem before I can deal with this student loan kind of thing. And what had happened was she had aged out of our insurance. She had been doing a lot of things with her arms, her hands, and she had carpal tunnel. And she needed surgery. And she had no insurance. She was in a lot of pain. She had no more migraine medication. The migraines were just killing her. One of her so-called friends said, I have a solution for you. And he introduced her to heroin. And she said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And he said, he convinced her that if you take just this tiny little amount, you will never get addicted. And somehow, for a child who is so extremely intelligent, she believed that. I think it was just the intensity of the pain. And he, of course, gave it to her for free. And he showed her how to shoot up, and, very tiny amount. And it took away her migraine instantly. And she thought, this is wonderful. This is the perfect drug. And, she never segued from any kind of painkillers into heroin. She just went straight into it. And the point wasn't to get high. The point was to get rid of the pain. So this, so-called friend of hers kept giving it to her for free. And then it got to a point where she had to pay for it. And somehow, she had still kept her grades up. She had a 3-point something in college, and she was still working. And so she never did get back into college, and she just kept working to pay for this habit. Well, by the time she told me, she was into such a large amount, she knew she needed help. So she said, Mom, I'm out. I don't have any money. I'm going through withdrawal. She was shaking. She had terrible, terrible stomach cramps. She said, if you give me a little bit of money, I will get a fix, and enough for, a couple times. And I will go to a methadone clinic. And it really, really came to a head for Chelsea when she came out and got in the Jeep after getting her methadone. And I said, look in the car next to us. And we looked down, because my Jeep was up high. And there was a guy who had been in there with her, and he had gotten his methadone, and he came out and he was shooting up right next to me. I had never seen anyone shoot up. And he was shooting up, and he was just out. He was passed out. The thing was still tied on his arm, and needle laying there in his lap. And she was like, Mom, I gotta quit. They're not helping me to quit here. They don't want me to quit. They want to keep me as a client. They got her on some kind of government thing, and they were getting paid. And she said, they don't want to help me wean down off of this methadone. And she said, I'm going to do it myself. So what she would do is she would go back in, and it was liquid, and she would drink part of it and throw the rest in the trash. All they saw through the window was that she was drinking something. So when she got down to a very small amount that she was drinking, she said, I'm stopping. I'm going to go cold turkey. And she did, and she went through a small amount of withdrawal, sweating and the stomach cramps and that kind of thing. But by the next day, she was okay, just kind of like the flu. So she went quite a while clean, I guess. Really at that point, I didn't know what she was doing. I would watch for signs, but there were no signs, because when she would get high, you couldn't tell. She was just in a good mood. That was it. She didn't do anything else. She didn't drink. She didn't smoke weed. So it's very hard to tell when she was using and not using. She never stole from us, never stole money. She kept working somehow through the whole thing. And then she told me she was back using again. And at this point, she had got a boyfriend who was also using. And the two of them just drug each other down so badly that she moved out with him, and they would go from motel to motel. And finally, she admitted to me that she couldn't hold a job. She was prostituting to get the money, and so was he. And I mean, they were at rock bottom.
But no, not seeing my kids has been the biggest problem for, I mean, I haven't seen them at all coming up on 2 years. But even before that, it was down to twice a month for a while. And there was months in the beginning that I went like 6 months without seeing them. And so that's been like really tough. And it's like people want to tell me, well, you'll get to see your kids when you get enough time sober. It's like, how do you think I'm going to get enough time sober when you get to subtract and dangle in front of me the only thing that literally matters to me in this world? Like, the only thing.
Kind of like a cycle.
Right. And so, like, I would go as long as I could, and then I would lose my shit now and then and just snap for a little while and realize that that's not going to work out for me, and get back up on my feet and do it all over again. Which is why, let's see, in the last 2 years, I've had 4 relapses, which total about 25 days in 2 years. It's the longest I've been sober since I was 15 years old. So we're talking in 27 years. So everybody wants, well, yeah, you relapse. People like to point out your failures. I guess it makes them feel good about themselves. But to me, it's not a failure. Because every other time in my life when I relapsed, you didn't know where I was or what I was doing for decades. We're talking 5, 10, 15 years at a time. It wasn't a 5-day bender and get back up on my feet and try again. I literally haven't had this many days sober in a 2-year period since I was 15 years old.
How many times do you think in your lifetime you've relapsed? Best guess.
Over 100.
And you keep getting back up.
Right. Well, the other ones I didn't want to. I didn't try to. I just keep going until I got in enough trouble that I had to. I had relapsed, and then I had gotten caught at my job relapsing. And I was sent home, and somehow in my drunk thinking, I thought that I needed to go and talk to them about something having to do with it, except I was so alcohol sick that I couldn't get there without having a drink. So, and sometimes it worked out where I could actually control that, but most of the time it didn't. I don't know how I managed to convince myself again that it would work, but anyway, I started drinking so I could feel normal, so I could get this done, and then I drove to work. Well, took months, I think, before I remembered this, but I remember seeing a semi coming up towards an intersection and seeing a semi going behind a tree and then not coming out the other side, except the tree wasn't wide enough to hide a semi. So I thought, well, that's really strange, and I thought I just made that up. Like, something didn't, because I would see it if there was a semi parked there. Well, I kept going, and there was a stop sign that even sober people that later checked told me that I would not have seen that stop sign, but as buzzed as I was, I definitely didn't see it and blew through a stop sign, and a semi hit me in my leased vehicle, which I had just lapsed on insurance payments on. So not only did I have to get jaws of life out of the vehicle, spend 10 days in a coma, wake up with a fractured hip, traumatic brain injury, but then I got a $10,000 lawsuit from the semi truck for the damage that I did to the truck. Oh yeah. I turned myself in on leaving the scene of an accident. So I had hit somebody in Canton, and I had been drinking, and I didn't want to go to jail right then. So I decided I'm leaving because it's going to be obvious that I'm drunk, and I don't feel like going to jail right now. So I just left, and they used like all the cameras in the area to get my plate, and contacted me that there was a warrant out, a bench warrant. So I guess they wouldn't have come for me, but sooner or later I would have went to jail. So I just went and turned myself in. Whatever jail they contract with, or there's something to do with the jails being full, they shipped me up to Clare County. It was like a 2-hour ride in a van with handcuffs on, and I sat in there and began to turn yellow and hallucinate and have dreams that seemed like reality, and eventually was able to convince the jail that, look, you can think I'm faking if you want, but I cannot fake yellow eyes. I'm a heavy drinker. I know what this is. If you leave me in here, you're going to have a body on your hands. And when they finally realized, oh, lawsuit, it was like, get him out of here. And they got me out of there as quick as they could, dropped me off the hospital, and my time was served.
What was the diagnosis?
4-stage cirrhosis of the liver, which is the final stage, and which brought on also diabetes, but at the time.
How long ago was that?
2.5 years ago. The research that I found online said 57% are dead within a year. Most likely that's the 57% that can't quit drinking, because if you drank yourself to the point of cirrhosis of the liver, chances are pretty slim that you're going to actually recover. And I didn't. I was bent on just getting dead. This was my opportunity. I didn't own a gun. I didn't plan on hanging myself. I was afraid of pain. So I thought, I'm just going to drink until I can't drink anymore. When I got there, right before the cirrhosis, I was drinking 1/5 to 2/5 a day.
And afterwards, when you were thinking that way, when you were...
You know, I was on probation, so it was very hard to get away with it. So not much, just whenever I could get the money and get away from everybody watching me for long enough to get a drink. It really wasn't going to be anything quick, but I didn't think it would take much. I had assumed with 4-stage cirrhosis of the liver, I might not have to go through but maybe 2/5 or something before it was done. But so God had other plans for me, because I kept trying to do that and kept trying to do that and kept trying to do that, and nothing was happening. My diabetes went away, got better. Pastor later laid hands on me, and I come to find out recently that they can't find anything wrong with my liver on the tests. The blood work came back normal. I said, normal for a good liver or normal for cirrhosis liver? They said, normal for a healthy liver. I said, all right, well, the blood work doesn't tell all the story, but I was expecting to hear that. Can we get the ultrasound? Well, this was in a treatment center, one of my relapses up north, and they were able to get me an ultrasound like the next week, which doesn't happen down here, but apparently with the population so low up there, it can happen. So I got a ultrasound and can't find anything wrong. So diabetes gone, liver cirrhosis, can't find it, and I just had my eyes checked 10 days, 2 weeks ago, and my eyes are better. The eyes went bad when the diabetes and the cirrhosis came. I couldn't see. I never wore glasses all my life, but suddenly I needed them, and then I had to get new ones because I lost them on a drunkalog. And when I got the new ones, they said your eyes are actually improving, that your sight is better. You probably could pass the driving test now. These are just for the stigmatism that I had before. Yeah, most people have heard of Teen Challenge, which adults are allowed in, by the way, but a kind of brother, cousin, sister to the Teen Challenge program is Life Challenge. And I actually don't completely understand the difference. It's never been explained, really, but it is a 1-year-long faith-based, the faith being Christian, program. And this one here has broken off from the main Life Challenge core or whatever, and is actually just called Life Challenge of Michigan, which runs relatively the same track. It's ran by a pastor, and it has been run thus far by volunteers. And you go to church and CR meetings, which are basically a Christian version of AA. It's kind of like an odd compression of church meets AA meeting. Starts off with praise and worship and testimony, and then it goes into breaking off into groups like you would in most AA meetings. I actually thought it was quite strange at first, but now I far prefer it. But I didn't take faith seriously until the first time alcohol really brought me to my knees, my like 24 or something, after that domestic violence. And so I went after my faith for like a year, pretty hard, and had some encounters with God, I would call them, just some experiences that I don't explain away. I don't try to explain away. I'm sure there's a way. Science always finds a way to explain away this stuff, but I felt it and I know it was real, so I don't need to explain it. I need to figure out, personally, I need to figure out how to do it, how to live it. Because, even the best of people have bad sides and sins and things. And so it's a struggle. Being told as an alcoholic and a screw up most of my life that, I'm not a good person, I guess it just eventually became to where I wasn't a good person. And I have to learn how to be one, because it's not natural, it's not trained, it's not... My natural inclinations go do, all kinds of bad things. So it's just a matter of whatever I found, I keep trying things, and then what works for me, I keep trying to keep that in my life and make that a new habit. It's just figuring out what works for you. So for me, reading the Bible helps a lot, but it's hard for me to find. It's like in AA, they talk about a 50-pound phone. You the phone always seems to weigh 50 pounds when you most need to make the phone call. Well, the Bible is the same way. The devil don't want me to make that phone call to a sponsor, but he also don't want me to pick up that Bible, because they both might help me become a better person, and then I might help someone else. And if that starts happening, he's out of business, right? So whenever I need the Bible the most is probably the times when I don't feel like doing it the most. And so I'll get into little kicks where I'm real good at reading it like 3-4 times a day, and then I'll go a week where all I'm reading is the one little daily verse that pops up on my phone. And so it's like the difference between famine and feast. You know, if you're eating a granola bar every day for a week and then someone takes you to buffet and you pig out, like, yeah, you feel good for a day, but then if you go back to the granola bar, you're still, that's me with the spirituality. It's struggling to make it a habit of praying every day, which I do. Praise and worship, I think, needs to be a bigger part of my life, and Bible reading. These are all things that I've put into place at some point. They worked, and then because they weren't a habit, they didn't stay in place. So I just struggle with keeping going. It's like you get a habit of going to an AA meeting every Tuesday, then you start seeing people there and you make friends, and next thing you know, you're like driving to that meeting without thinking about it. Well, like only the Bible is good for me, but it's not near as exciting as going and talking to people at an AA meeting. I might have a good day and feel better that day, but it just doesn't give me that reward system in my brain to train me to make it a habit and keep it a habit.
What happened this time to prompt you to go in?
I'd had enough, and I was afraid I was going to die. I was pretty certain that if I continued on the path I was on for very much longer, I wouldn't be here.
Talk to me about the program you're in now. What does it entail?
I work a 12-step program. I go to a mix of AA, which is 12-step AA. I also do refuge recovery, which is Dharma-based, which is 12-step with Buddhist principles. And I go to an HA group, even though I wasn't a heroin addict, it's still kind of a mirror of AA. So I do these things to increase my spiritual life. What's really helped me recover is being able to take a good, honest, hard look at myself, recognize my character defects, clear up the wreckage of my past, take ownership of the things that I've done, and increase my spiritual life. You know, before I really thought that addiction and addiction treatment was stopping the drug and being able to stay stopped through willpower, through self-knowledge, and that really isn't what it's about. It's about fixing yourself. Putting down the drugs is the easiest part of it. Being able to take an honest look at yourself and see what's really wrong with you and take honest steps to do something about it, that's really made the difference.
The first time I started recovery was pancreatitis. I quit drinking in 2010, and coincidentally, or not coincidentally, yeah, it's not a coincidence, but like a buddy of mine overdosed on heroin that year, and I was forced to quit drinking. So I started going to AA. I wasn't in a program, but I started going to AA, and then I found out that I didn't like it because like I thought all the guys in the groups and stuff, they were like kind of like, you don't know shit about this, and I really didn't. I was very naive and like not ready to stop using. So like I might have like I quit drinking due to the pancreatitis, but like I indulged in all substances that I could get for many, many years. So, but the first time I actually got in recovery would be 2020, 2019. I started like, it was my first rehab stint in Pontiac, the beginning of, the end of 2019.
And during this time when you were, using and then trying to go through recovery, what type of consequences did you face? Any legal troubles or?
No, not legal trouble, but like every kind of trouble that you could think of that would be, non like Jail, I mean, I did go to jail. I had stolen a car when I was 18 and ended up in Ohio, served 90 days. It wasn't drug induced, but like I had been using a lot of substances at that time. So like the impulsivity really made me like think that it didn't matter. Like I would just get away with it, you know, like whatever, fuck it. And it was my sister's car, and she dropped the charges, and I had to serve 90 days in Ohio jail, Norwalk County. And but I don't remember what you just asked me. Oh, consequences. Yeah, so consequences. Well, I developed pancreatitis. 2018, I was diagnosed with HIV from using needles and, well, soliciting myself to gay men, and just living a lifestyle of destruction. I was using methamphetamine really heavily, and like I said, solicited in order to get meth, and I was injecting meth on, you know, at least a couple times, you know, that I did. I remember the first time a guy was over at his place, and he said, you ever bang this shit? I said, no, and he, you know, he shot me up with methamphetamine. Later on that year, I started getting really sick, and I went and got, you know, ran some tests at the hospital, and they told me I was contracted HIV. So, you know, it's
So that was your motivation?
No, that wasn't my motivation. Like my motivation to get back in treatment, like I've lost 5 or 6 good friends to suicide and overdose just recently. I think I have combined motivations that like all the signs were being shown. I just didn't want to look at it. That like, you know, my girlfriend, she passed away last year in October, a heroin overdose. We were living at a trap house in Detroit, and I was working for the dope dealer, doing things for him, and she ended up using too much heroin the day after I saw her, and I was going over to do plumbing at his house, and he called me and said that she had passed.
How old was she?
29.
How long have you been clean this time?
50, almost 60 days. I've been here in Milford since January, and I've had 2 relapses, and I don't understand why they've let me back, but they have. Like, I've been honest about everything. Like, I really want this. I don't want to die. I've overdosed on fentanyl. Like, I smoked it thinking it was crack, but I knew something was weird about it because it didn't look like crack, just this white powder. I'm like, whatever, just give it to me. I was hanging out, you know, with a bunch of prostitutes, and like, I smoked it and fell out, came back. This girl was giving me CPR. She said that we Narcaned you twice and I had to give you CPR. Immediately when I woke up, I shook it all off, you know what I mean? And I was like, well, where's my crack? So like, it's just this thought that like that powerlessness, like, you know, just like, I'm not invincible. Like I died and then asked for more drugs. Like, that's just a twisted logic, you know? Could be anywhere up to a year, but I love it out here. You know, I don't have an extended deadline. Like, I could be here a year, I could be here 2 years. I've already been here 10 months, you know, and like, so like, I don't put a cap on how long I should be here, because I'm doing whatever I can in order to stay clean, because that's the only thing that's keeping me alive. Like, I'm happy about life. Like, I have integrity and people love me, and I'm able to like really witness people grow and have myself grow. And it's nice to know that people care, and my parents are proud of me again, and like my sister and my brother are happy for me. And all that worry and pain I put them through, like, I owe it to them, you know, and especially God, you know, because like I'm a firm believer in higher power. that like I'm here for a reason, because I should be dead. You know, like I could go through all the details of all the drugs that I've used and the high amount of contents of like pills that I've taken, and just like a normal person wouldn't survive some of the things I've been through, in my opinion.
And how long have you been clean now?
60 days today.
And what do you think your motivation is this time in recovery?
I can't go back to where I was. I hit a bottom where there was nothing left to go back to, and it was really ugly. I had no choice, it felt, and my addiction took everything. I think like 3 months ago I slept on the side of 6 Mile with nothing, just the clothes I had. I didn't own nothing. I robbed somebody to get some drugs, and it was a nightmare. And then at the end, when I was finally ready to go home and get clean, I went to the bus station. I had nothing, and it was like a higher power moment. Everyone in the bus station gave me $1 to get home, and I made it 3.5 hours back to Traverse City. And I got there and I knew that I was lucky to be alive, and I just made the steps I needed to make to get here.
They were terrible, and each one would take turns going into a rehab and getting clean. And really, he was the one who would, every time she would get clean, he would come out and they'd put him in a halfway house. Basically, they could buy drugs by walking down the street. And this would happen continuously. And they said that they would test them. And so once in a while, they would randomly test them. And if they tested dirty for anything, they would kick them out. And this was a circle that went on and on and on for years. And of course, you know, when you start dating someone who also is an addict, it's like two drowning people, and you just keep clamoring on each other and pulling each other back down. And that's what was going on. And this guy was a really, really bad influence on her, and he would cheat on her with different females who were in these three-quarter houses. And then she'd get depressed and she'd end up using again. And it just went around in circles for years. And when he would go back into the rehab, she would be left alone, and they were just living in these seedy motels. And she kept taking in animals. She loved animals. She was an animal rescuer. And she'd be living in the motel with all these animals. And she got finally into an NA program in the suburbs. We lived in the suburbs. We did not live in the big city. And she got into an NA program in a church, and she was back on methadone. And they made fun of her. They were not supervised. The people just tore her apart and said, you're only supposed to be here if you're clean, and you're not clean if you're on methadone, was their idea. And they made her feel really, really unwelcome. And so again, she went through a whole process, getting off from the methadone. And at that point, like, everything in her life just started caving in. Even though she was at rock bottom, you would think you can't go any further. It did. She started losing friends to heroin. And she didn't feel welcome at NA. She didn't know where to go. Every time one of her friends would die and she'd go to the funeral, she would get clean and say, I'm never doing this again. And I would beg her, please don't make me go through what their parents are going through. I won't, Mom. I promise. I won't. So then she started going into inpatient rehab places. And I learned that when insurance pays for someone to go into the rehabs, it's not really long enough. that they usually pay 30 days, maybe 60 days, 90 days at the most. And this is an ongoing process. And this is something that they have to want. They can't be court ordered to go in to do this. They have to want it. And there were so many tragedies in Chelsea's life that she seemed like she really did want it. But she went through the whole program there. Then she went into another one. She actually got an apartment at this other one. They provided an apartment. It was more a last level, getting you back into society and functioning. So this situation looked like it was going to be really good. But she had a doctor's appointment, and she didn't have a car, and she had to take a bus, and the bus was late. She got back late to a mandatory meeting, and they just have this no excuses policy, and they kicked her out. And she had to start all over because that was the last phase type thing, and they had a very long waiting list, and she couldn't get back in. And this was just like the story of her life. She just over and over and over, in and out of these rehabs. It finally got to the point where her boyfriend had said, this is it, I'm going into a different rehab that I haven't been in before. When he did, he met someone in there who said, I have a job for you when you get out, if you want it. And so he let her know that they would be starting a new life. And I know she heard this promise over and over and over again, but he swore that, this was going to be it. It's going to be the last time they were starting a new life. She had been clean for quite a while. I don't remember, it was 3 months, 6 months, something like that, but she had been clean. And she came up here to see us. She had never seen our house. And she was doing yard work, which she loved to do, and she got to see her dog again. And this was just, a very promising time. I was skeptical, but I didn't let her know that. I was trying to encourage. She got to see a friend that she hadn't seen, that she used to hang around with in grade school. And she saw that friend was married and had kids, and got to meet them. And she said to me, Mom, I want to have kids. I want to have kids. I want this life. I don't want to go back downstate anymore. And her boyfriend was in a rehab that was up here. And everything looked very promising to her. This is what her goal was, to get back into college and this kind of thing. And she was on an anti-anxiety medication, and her doctor was downstate. And she said, Mom, I have to go back downstate just to see this doctor, and I'll be right back up. And I just had this horrible intuition. I said, please don't do that. We'll get you in a doctor up here. She said, I can't. This medication has withdrawals that are worse than heroin. I have to go down there. She went down there, and a friend of hers paid for her to stay in a motel. She got a call from the doctor's office, said the doctor had an emergency, was canceling all his appointments, and couldn't see her for 2 weeks. And she called me and said, Mom, the withdrawal is getting to me. I have got to do something. I don't know what. And I said, please don't use, please. And she said, I have a friend who can give me some Xanax. And that's not what she was on, but she said she thought that the Xanax would help the withdrawals. And she said, I'll let you know how things happen. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. And that was the last I heard from her. And I couldn't get a hold of her. She wasn't answering her phone. One of her friends called me and said, I heard a rumor. I don't want to scare you, but I heard a rumor through the drug group of friends that Chelsea's gone. Now, 3 days had gone by that we were trying to find her. So I called the police in that city. And the police said, we can't do welfare checks. We don't have time. And I'm like, yeah, you can. Okay. This could be fatal. So finally somebody got on the phone, a woman, and she said, a woman cop, and she said, we had a call to that hotel for an overdose. We don't have names. And I called the morgue, and they said, we think that we have your daughter. They didn't know why the police didn't call, because they knew who they had. They had her phone. What had turned out was that she did see her friend who gave her Xanax, but she didn't think it was going to be enough. And she told her friend that she was going to use just a little. And her friend kept telling her, don't do that. I'll get you more Xanax, but don't do that. And she said, oh, everything will be fine. Well, when they found her, when the police went into the motel, there was absolutely nothing in there. No possessions. She had no clothes on. She had been dead for 3 days. There was no drug paraphernalia. They had no idea what had happened, although they pretty much had an idea. I shouldn't say that. She had been robbed blind. In the meantime, we lived 3 hours away from the morgue, and I had to call her sister to go identify her body. And when she got there, you know, she had been dead for 3 days, so they had her identify her by her tattoos, and it was her. And her sister said that was the worst thing she ever had to do. I couldn't have done it. So in the meantime, they had to do an autopsy and a drug scan and all this kind of thing. And so they did. And at the time of her burial, we didn't have any of that back, but we pretty much knew that had something to do with drugs. Of course, by that time, the guy who sold her the drugs, his phone was shut off. He changed his street name. The guy just basically ghosted. They went to her boyfriend, who had just gotten out from the rehab up here. And he said that he would set up a meeting with him, but then he never did, because he said, they're going to kill me. You know, I can't do that. And in the meantime, we had to have a funeral. And somehow they were able to do an open coffin. And she just looked so angry. It was so weird. I had never seen her face like that. She just looked so angry. And let me tell you that on the last day, they said, they called my husband and I in, and we were the ones who closed the coffin. That's the worst thing in my entire life that I've ever done. And that's pretty much the way the story ended. They never caught the guy, because in our state, selling drugs that led to a death is a felony. And when the drug scan, or whatever you call it, came back, they saw that this guy had laced it with fentanyl. And I guess the DEA told me that this is something that they do to spread the word around that they're selling really good stuff. And he knew that my daughter was leaving, and he knew that he was going to lose a customer, so he used her. He murdered her. And these are people that Chelsea considered her friends. She saw the good in everything, in everyone. And she never, ever would have believed that this guy would have done this to her. But there's no other way. There's no way to fluff this over. He killed her. He killed her to get more sales.
It's about like whether I'm doing well to me is based on how I'm doing internally, how I'm doing sobriety wise, how I'm treating people, how I feel about myself. I am living at home with my parents, so I'm 42, my parents are 65, and I'm back home. But you know, if you've lived long enough, you know that that's not uncommon. You know, there's nothing flashy, there's nothing, I don't got cars, I don't wear Nike, I'm not, you know, but I never go hungry. And before in my life, I would complain about everything. I'm very critical. And it's funny because I was critical at times when I had more in my life. And now there's not hardly anything, but I find more reasons to be grateful and to be happy and to be thankful, to recognize like that it's not, because having been broke most of my life, it's not, things don't buy happiness. They don't bring happiness into your life. It's got to come from you, or at least that's what psychology teaches. I think it's a combination of you and your relationship with God, because I guess if it's got to come from you, then it's my role in it is continuing to try to make that relationship better, because as long as there's a certain, like, you know, if it was a battery on your phone, every time it got into 20% or lower, it turned red, then I have to keep that relationship at 20% or higher, you know, like I can't go in the red anymore, because that's like drinks and messing up and hurting people I don't like, or not that I don't like, but I don't want to hurt.
So focus on self-care?
Yeah, I mean, self-care is the psychology term for it. My relationship with my higher power is how I see it, because I can focus on me all day long and still be miserable. I can make sure my shoes are shining and my truck's as clean as that old truck can possibly be, and you know, and my girlfriend looks a certain type of way, but I can still be completely miserable inside. So it's not a focus on me. I have to focus on God. And then when I think that I'm doing what God would want me to do, then I feel better about myself.
Where's the future go from here? What do you see for a year?
Because most Americans answer that question in terms of career, and I don't care what I do. I need to grow spiritually, and personally I would like to look into either how I can be sort of like an emergency response kind of person, like, because I would have loved to have just packed up and gone down and seen how I could possibly help with all the floods and the tornado problems down in Louisiana, because I want to do something that actually matters. I don't want to clock in every day and sell things for somebody else. I don't want to you know, make somebody's lawn look prettier so they can come home and smile that day. You know, that's cute, that's helpful, but that's not, I want to do something that actually matters. And so besides that, maybe a pastor, an evangelist. I used to kind of want to do that for animals, but I can't see medical field for people. I don't like blood, so maybe if it were something taking care of children, maybe the elderly, something like that. I want to leave a mark. I want to make a difference. I want to do something that actually seems to matter, not sell a product.
Wherever I want it to go. I'm the architecture of my own destiny. If I continue down the path that I'm on, my options are limitless. I mean, and I can't really say where I'm going to go from here. I just follow God's will. And by following God's will, I test it against the 4 absolutes. If it's honest, if it's kind, if it's loving, and if it's true.
So when you leave here, where are you headed?
Because right now I reside in a sobriety house. That's where this interview is being taken right now. I've been here for just under 11 months. In that time, I have moved my way through the program and phased up through the phases that you're supposed to go through. I've become a house manager. I kind of oversee the 12 or so chuckleheads that live here with me, and I couldn't be happier for it. And I'm actually graduating from this very, very prestigious program at the end of this month. I'm moving in with a friend in Brighton, and that is a stepping stone for me. Next week, I get my license back. You may not be able to tell through the interview, but I've had extensive dental work done, and I get my teeth on Tuesday. And I'm a part of something now. I have a life that I'm proud of. And I have people that love and support me. I have an army of them behind me, not just 1 or 2. I have a whole army of people that love and support me. I have a good job. I'm going to be getting a truck in about a month and a half, and I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to live my life the way I want to, doing the things that make me happy. And everything else is going to fall into place because I'm not going to have drugs or alcohol in my life.
So when you think about the future, 5 years, 10 years from now, where do you see yourself going?
Well, I actually have that plan set. I'm planning on going back to school. I want to go into art therapy at Wayne State. I like that because I'm an artist. I paint and I draw, and I also write. Like, I'm very creative, and I want to use my experience to help other people. And that's like the job for an artist right there, is art therapist. So that's like my main goal. But like, the first thing is just staying sober and getting my feet back on the ground and like being okay and stable enough to actually get a car, pay my bills, buy a house, be able to go to school, you know, shit like that, like the necessities. And all those things are taken care of right now. So like, I don't worry about that. Like, I'm very like 1 minute at a time because that's all I have, you know.
So where do you see life going 5 years, 10 years from now?
I don't know. I really, in the past, I've tried to control, or like, I want this or I want that. You know, I have a wife and 2 children, so obviously that's a big focus of mine. But I know that in my past, I've been so focused on getting here, like to this certain point, that like, what if there could be something way bigger and better. So I'm learning to just live day by day. And, you know, honestly, by doing that, I'm getting further faster than I would if I was setting a place to go, because I'm exceeding that place, and it's just amazing.
If you could send a message to people who are just starting to walk on that path of alcoholism, what kind of a message would you give them?
For me, I needed patience. So it has to, and I just don't know if anybody said that to me in the beginning, if I really would have heard what they were saying. But I needed to know that this is going to take a long time, and it's not going to be comfortable for a while. And you might mess up, and you know, like all that, just kind of preparing you that it's not like graduating. You don't get your diploma and yay, you're sober, go on with your life. You don't ever have to do this sobriety thing again. You're good. It's a journey, and it takes time, and you're gonna scrape your knee, and You're not going to be happy like tomorrow. You might be happy tomorrow, but that's the pink cloud. It'll go away. And on your 90 days or something, you're going to start feeling like, man, is there any more exciting to life, or is there any more fun, or is there what do I got to look forward to if I can't get a buzz? Or you learn how to appreciate things that you never could appreciate before, and things that you just would overlook in drinking and drugging and seeking pleasure. And it's not, the things you have don't change. It's back to about what changes inside you. But for me, I needed to know that it'll come if I just give it the time. If I just keep doing, like, it gets better and it gets better and it gets better. And I'm not there, but it's like, it's a lot better than it ever was.
I would say get out before you hurt yourself enough to need to get out. Because I was not a high bottom addict. I wasn't like, oh, I have a problem and things are starting to go bad. I had to drag myself through hell. I had to be homeless. I had to be malnourished. I had to be broken. And although I don't regret my path whatsoever now because it made me who I am today, I just don't wish that upon anybody. So the gift of desperation is a beautiful thing, but I just don't wish for everyone to have to get to that point.
Just love yourself, love people around you, love as much as possible, be vulnerable, show that you have a weakness and that you might need help. Really let people in, because at the end of the day, that, you know, that we only have each other, you know, and like love as much as you can, you know, because like life is very fragile and precious and important. And if you don't show your appreciation for people in life, then they're just going to slip through, you know, they fall through the cracks. And I've seen it so many times, and it's sad. But there's a beauty besides it, you know, when you really appreciate the life you've been granted, you don't want to use. You know, you're happy with, you know, and you accept that life's the way it's supposed to be. And you may want to change certain things, but you got to change the way you feel and the way you think first. You know, and you can't force anybody to, you know, be clean. But you can show them that they do want it in certain ways, and that's by treatment, tolerance, and love, understanding, you know. That's what's important, is just, because I've lost so many friends that I cared about, just one by one, you know, just they've died, you know. You can't get those people back.
To listen, like to find other addicts, even if you don't think you're one, because 9 times out of 10 when you end up in classes or the courts, and I fought that, like, it's correction. You're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to live my life. You're trying to control me. But the reality is, you know, the things in my life, I'm learning the obstacles in my life are correction. And if I don't take that correction, then life is going to correct me. And just life can be a lot better. Life's a beautiful thing, but drugs will take it away. Everything about it. I wasn't ready to live. Once I got in the pits of addiction, I wasn't ready to live until I completely wanted to die.
So, what advice would you give to people who are in early stages of use?
The people you think are your friends that are helping you to get high, they're not your friends. They see you as a dollar sign. The people who sell you the drugs see you as a dollar sign. You are nothing to them. The people who you are something to, your friends, your family, every relationship in your life, you take those with you when you die. And there is only 2 ways out. there's only two ways out. You get clean and you stay clean, or you die.